Welcome back to the Leo Djax channel where I talk about Dragon Quest and Jrpgs every week. Consider subscribing. Today we're looking at a Reddit post I made which goes over my history with turn-based RPGs and look at what games people from the Jrpg subreddit think has the best turn-based combat. Something to note is that during the video, gameplay footage will be periodically shown for those who are actively watching the video because it can get kind of boring just looking at my OBS window capture. However, feel free to just listen to this video like a podcast of sorts. So, let's get into it. So this is from me, of course. What JRPG has the best turn-based combat in your opinion? And then I elaborate with my history, I'll read that. When I was a wee lad in middle school, my first turn-based game was Pokemon, and I was a Pokemon-only fan for a bit. After high school graduation, I played Dragon Quest XI in 2020. I felt like this was the first real JRPG I played. Sorry if it sounds like I'm looking down on Pokemon, but Dragon Quest had so many new experiences for me. Difficulty spikes, cool guys who could dual-wield swords, and a nice story. I was getting a bit tired of the Pokemon journey tale. I became obsessed with Dragon Quest, even managed to build a small community from it, which of course is you guys. We're approaching 1,000 subscribers, I cannot thank you all enough. And Dragon Quest XI helped revitalize my interest in gaming. The pep mechanic was much more interesting than Pokemon's Dynamaxing for me, which is from Pokemon Sword and Shield, I believe. I was a big Pokemon fan, so of course when the first Pokemon game on Switch came out, which was Sword and Shield, for me, I consider that the first one because I don't count Let's Go, but I played that game and it just felt like it was a disappointment, you know, and then I discovered Dragon Quest, and needless to say, I was astounded. So in 2020, if you asked me what game had the best turn-based combat, I would say Dragon Quest XI. The Dragon Quest franchise is in my top 3 favorite currently and likely will be until I die. But 2021 was a new year, so what game would take over my life? I knew it had to be turn-based. It's my preferred combat style. With that in mind and my friend telling me Fire Emblem Three Houses was super fun, you'll never guess what I played next. Anyways, Fire Emblem Three Houses was a blast. It was my first strategy RPG, played all 3 routes. I found Best Girl Edelgard, and I really liked how any unit could be any class, and how that affected turn-based combat. In short, in 2021, Fire Emblem Three Houses had the best combat for me. Onward to 2022, Pokemon Legends Arceus was released this year, and man, this is a pretty good Pokemon game, I will say. But it paled in comparison to the marvelous game that would release later that year, Persona 5 for Nintendo Switch. This game was a godsend for me. Persona 5 had the RPG elements from Dragon Quest and the social sim aspects from Fire Emblem Three Houses, a match made in heaven. Persona 5 is a very stylish game, and that translates to its combat. You'll know what I mean if you've played the game. With turn-based mechanics like knockdowns and baton passes, this game was epic. Definitely my favorite game combat-wise in 2022. Persona 5 and Xenoblade 3, another epic 2022 release, made me realize something. I like games with some depth in the combat. With this newfound realization obtained, 2023 rolls around, and I'm currently playing Trails of Cold Steel 3. This is a really fun game. And I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later, but unlike most turn-based RPGs, you can move around and positioning can matter, unlike playing Dragon Quest XI with freeform camera. And don't get me started on Brave Orders. If Trails of Cold Steel 4 has this same combat but with small changes here and there, I can see that game having the best turn-based combat for me in 2023. Who knows though, we still have so much of the year left. And that's pretty much the end of my post. So as you can see here, what I basically do is that I go through my favorite turn-based combat systems from 2020 all the way to 2023, even though it is a bit early in the year, of course, but Trails has left a very, very, very deep impression on me, and this quite literally is one of the greatest combats in a game. It's one of the greatest combat systems in a game for me right now. But enough about me, right? Let me read what some of these people in the Jrpg subreddit have to say, because there are some very interesting comments that caught my eye. So let's see, the number, like the one at the top was Grandia, and I looked it up. It seemed pretty interesting. It's not a game I think I'd realistically play, but you know, I do think I looked at it, it looked pretty interesting. But I think the big one here, you know, because this subreddit post had that I made had 190 comments, so a lot of comments, and I read most of them. But a game that really caught my interest is, okay, it's mentioned in this comment here, FF10. You know, very interesting game. I've played a bit of FF10. I don't remember disliking it, but I remember it didn't really catch my eye in terms of turn-based combat. But you know, I'm sure that's a game I need to give another chance to. But this second line right here, right? As someone else said, SMT typically feels good. My favorites are Digital Devil Saga and SJR. I don't know what that means since I haven't played any SMT5, any Shin Megami Tensei games. But let's read this bottom before I elaborate. If we're allowed to include tactics games, I think the whole genre is typically more engaging than most JRPGs, Disgaea, Tactics Ogre, etc. Now, SMT, right? There were a lot of comments on SMT, especially Shin Megami Tensei 5. And after looking into the combat and looking to see how the press turn system works and how it's similar to Persona, but it punishes you for making mistakes, right? Like if you miss an attack, you lose turns. If your attack gets repelled or absorbed, you lose all your turns. It's more punishing on the player, and this is something that I find really interesting, and it's caught my interest so much that after I beat Trails of Cold Steel 3 and then Trails of Cold Steel 4, I will probably play Shin Megami Tensei 5 because this combat has just really intrigued me. Oh, yep, and there's another comment right here. I think the best turn-based combat I've experienced was from Shin Megami Tensei 5. And just a lot of comments like this. So I think the big takeaway from this post that I made to Reddit is Shin Megami Tensei 5, essentially. That is a game that has very much caught my interest, and I will be most likely playing it this year. And I'll kind of see how the press turn system shapes up to the Break and Brave Orders system from Trails of Cold Steel. But speaking of Trails of Cold Steel 3, 4, and River Ray, which is actually coming out this year, I wanted to talk about this combat that I'm experiencing in, of course, Trails of Cold Steel 3, which is what I'm playing currently. Man, I'll reread this part of my post. Unlike most turn-based RPGs, you can move around and positioning can matter. This, what's the word? This extra option you can do that you don't see in a lot of other games is just so cool. And it allows you to set up cool combinations by putting your party members in a certain position to where you can attack more enemies in a row. Another thing about this game is that it encourages you to create builds that are very, very strong and powerful. If you put your mind to it, you can create a build that is very difficult to overcome for enemies and bosses. It reminds me a little bit of Fire Emblem Engage, where because you have so much freedom as the player, you can do some pretty nasty things to enemies, and I just love that, right? I love that freedom, but with that freedom, of course, comes with the game not being too hard, at least for me, right? I'm playing on hard mode right now. There's one more difficulty higher than that one, which is Nightmare mode, which I was like, I kind of don't want to play something that says Nightmare, so I was like, I'll play on hard mode, because I was playing on normal originally. Too easy, so then I put it up to hard. But even hard mode, not too difficult, at least from the boss fights that I've gone through so far, which I guess is going to be interesting for me because I heard Shin Megami Tensei 5 is actually hard. I am interested to know though what your guys' thoughts on YouTube, right? What is your what JRPG has the best turn-based combat in your opinion, right? And what JRPGs are you playing this year? Leave all that stuff below. I very much appreciate and read your comments. That's pretty much it for this video. I'll catch you guys next week where I will be back talking about Dragon Quest and JRPGs, of course. And later.